Welcome to Sense by Meg Faure, the podcast that brings calm, clarity, and confidence to the parenting journey. I'm your host, Meg Faure, occupational therapist, mom, author, and tech founder. But more importantly, someone who has spent decades walking alongside parents as they navigate the grey, the gritty, and the unbelievably beautiful moments of raising a little one. Parenting is not black and white. It is messy and miraculous in equal measure. And while every family is unique, the experience of becoming a parent is profoundly universal. My why has always been simple: to make this transition feel less overwhelming, to replace uncertainty with clarity, and to help you feel more steady in a season that can really shake your foundations. Each week on Sense, we explore the science behind your baby's development with leading experts. We sit down with real moms to talk honestly about the moments that don't make it onto social media. And we take the latest research and turn it into practical, nurturing sense that you can use in everyday life. So whether you are deep in the newborn haze, chasing after a busy toddler, or simply trying to make sense of it all, you are in the right place. Join us as we take the journey of a lifetime, one conversation, one insight, and one gentle step at a time. So let's start with a real life story. I want you to picture this. A delivery room. It's tense, it's bright, it's buzzing with people and emotions. And then that unmistakable sound of a newborn's cry that slices through the air. Tiny Amy has just taken her very first breath. Her mum, exhausted and tearful, feels a wave of relief. Dad's knees almost give way as he tries to take in the enormity of the moment. But what's going on for our little Amy? Well, for her, there's no relief. There's no joy. There's no welcome to the world sentiment. What she experiences is a physiological and sensory explosion. She comes from a muted world and enters the glare of white lights, the sharp smell of antiseptic, cold air on her skin that has only ever known warm water, and strong hands touching her for the first time. Until this moment, Amy has lived in a world of muted, calm, rhythmic, and deeply calming sensations. And suddenly, she is catapulted into a world that is bright and loud and cold and unpredictable and relentless. And this is where your baby's journey begins. An immature nervous system trying to make sense of the world that it wasn't yet built to handle independently. So in today's session, we are going to be talking about how do we take our little ones from this incredible womb world in which they have this perfect environment, and how do we bridge them across into our busy and chaotic and sensory world, and how do we do it with insight? So in order for us to understand how to do this, we want to take a little bit of a step back and have a look at what goes on in utero for your little ones. How do babies receive, process, and respond to the world? Well, what we know about babies once they are born is that they live in a very sensory-rich world, just like we do. But unlike us, they cannot filter what comes in or how they respond to the world. And that's because their brains are under construction, particularly the parts of the brains that are responsible for sorting and prioritizing sensory input. So let's look at the sensory systems in early life. Now, we know that we all learn about our world through our senses, our sense of touch, smell, sight, sound, taste, movement, which you may not have known of, the vestibular system, body sense, which is our sense of proprioception, it's feedback that we get from our muscles, and interoception, which is the internal needs like hunger, digestion, how fast is my heart beating, do I need to take a breath? That's all interior information from our sensory information inside our body. These are our 8 senses. You may have always learned that we had 5 senses, but in fact we have 8 senses that deliver us information all the time. Now, what's incredible about these senses is that on the day your baby is born, these senses are working. Some of them really well, and some of them not as well. The sense of touch, as an example, is a sense that is really well developed at birth. The sense of sight is not as well developed, and that's because your baby doesn't receive a lot of visual stimulation in utero. But one of the things that is profoundly immature is the brain's ability to organize all the sensory information because it's coming in and your baby cannot make sense of it. So the very, very first step when we look at sensory information coming in through all of our different senses into our brain is that our brains miraculously, and this is our central nervous system and our peripheral nervous system, so our nerves as well as our brain, actually habituate or filter out information that just isn't important. You are doing this right now. You are automatically filtering out irrelevant information. For instance, until this moment, you're not thinking about the clothes on your body, but now suddenly you notice that there is a seam, that there's something that you're sitting on. You may filter out the hum of the fridge or air conditioner where you're sitting now, or just the very subtle smells in the room. The reason that you haven't noticed these things until I mention them is that your magical brain has habituated them. In other words, it's filtered them out before they even reach your consciousness. Now, infants' central nervous systems are not as good as doing this as yours are. In fact, what happens for little ones is that their brains receive everything from their environment all at once and in full volume. And it's one of the early requirements of the first 3 months of life to begin to habituate sensory information and to begin to stay calm in the context of a very busy world. This is one of the reasons why newborns tire so quickly. They startle easily. They cry without an obvious reason. They become colicky and irritable, particularly in the last part of the day. And they rely heavily on us as caregivers to manage their environment and to soothe them. So let's unpack this habituation process a little bit more. There is a 3-step process. Information comes in. Our magical brains, similar to a computer system, filters what goes on, and then a response is generated. So let's look at those 3 steps. Incoming information. Our nerves and peripheral sensory systems deliver data from the senses to the brain. So let's have a look. One of our senses is our sense of vision. Our peripheral nerves are coming from our eyes and carrying information along our optical nerve into our brain, and there we can actually register what's going on. So this is the first step. It's that incoming information that comes from our peripheral and sensory system into our central nervous system. Our brain is incredible. It is able to actually filter and integrate what is important and what can be ignored. Basically, what the brain does is it has a look at any incoming information and it says, is this information novel? And it first checks that. And it says, okay, this is novel. It's new. So let's have a look at it. And then it says, is this novel information dangerous? So for instance, if your hand is on a hot plate on the stove, it goes, yes, that's dangerous. And then it can generate a response. So it first of all decides if it's novel and dangerous. If it is not dangerous, it'll go, this is novel, I can smell something, but it's not dangerous, I can ignore it and I can habituate it. Or your brain may go, it is not novel, it is something that's been there all the time, like the seam on the back of my clothing or a label in my clothes. And so I will automatically habituate it. I won't even pay attention to it. And that is our filtering or habituation system. It's taking that information, deciding what's novel, deciding what's important, and then deciding whether or not we need to actually be conscious of it. The next step is obviously becoming conscious of it and responding. So, my hand's on the hot plate of the stove, I'll quickly withdraw it. In babies, this step number 2 is really underdeveloped. And so what ends up happening is information comes in and your baby responds very quickly. So for instance, you are tilting your baby back to change their nappy. That vestibular information of having their head tilted back creates a big response, a Moro reflex where their hands shoot out and then back into the midline. That's the Moro or startle reflex. And that's happened because information came in and baby automatically responded. And so that filtration system and that integrating system is just not as well developed. And so for your little one, everything can feel quite urgent. So what does this mean for you? Well, understanding how immature your baby's sensory system is gives you enormous power as a parent. It will shape everything that you do when you hold your baby and relate to your baby. It will shape how you soothe your baby, how you look at their environment. Just looking around when you have a fractious baby, you'll be able to identify that maybe they're becoming overstimulated. It can shape how you feed your baby, how much stimulation they need around feed time, and when they are in the most receptive state to have a feed. It will shape how you set up sleep. And this doesn't just pertain to the newborn, it goes all the way through the toddler and preschool years too. It will shape how you play and stimulate your baby, because we know that the sensory information that comes into the brain will wire the brain for development. And so we need to use those sensory systems. And it will also help you to understand how to prevent meltdowns and overtiredness. So this is a golden nugget of information, and it is the reason why it was in chapter 1 of Baby Sense, and through many of the books, we talk about these sensory systems. So what is your job? We understand that your baby's brain's job is to filter information, and it doesn't do it well. So what are you going to do? Today's dose of sense is brought to you by Parent Sense, the expert-based parenting app that gives you daily support from pregnancy to sleep, feeding, and daily routines. Take the guesswork out of parenting. Download Parent Sense today and use the code SENSE50 for 50% off. So what is your job? We understand that your baby's brain's job is to filter information, and it doesn't do it well. So what are you going to do? Well, of course, your role is to act as your baby's sensory filter, reducing, structuring, and shaping the input that they receive so they do not become overwhelmed. So if you understand this, you're able to develop sensory eyes. And I always talk about the parent's ability to be able to look around the environment, to know what could be overstimulating your baby, to understand what to dampen down, and to understand a little bit more about what's going on for your baby so you can be that habituator for them. It is one of the reasons why swaddling works. So swaddling gives our babies proprioception, or deep pressure. And so when we do that, we take away all of the peripheral light touch pressure. We take away the moro and startle reflex that causes babies to feel very unsettled. And so we control their environment. We control what goes in simply by swaddling them. It is also why white noise works. So all of those peripheral sounds that are coming in from the environment and are overwhelming your baby, well, when you put white noise on in their bedroom, you're able to actually dampen their nervous system so that they don't listen to every sound. You are habituating the auditory space for them. It is also why rocking works, because your baby's central nervous system has been so used to that lulling feel of movement in utero that when you rock your baby, you help to soothe them and soothe their central nervous system. It is also why dim lights work. Think about the interuterine space. It's dull, it's dim. Your baby doesn't have to make sense of sharp lines and sharp colors. And so by dimming the environment in the nursery, you can really help to habituate the visual system. It is also why neutral warmth feels safe. Babies are used to being the same temperature all the time, and so become very disconcerted when they're suddenly changing temperature, like getting into or out of a bath. And it is also why slow, predictable routines calm your baby's nervous system. You're not spoiling your baby by doing these things. You are replicating the womb world, an environment that was perfectly designed to keep your baby calm, regulated, and primed for development. Let's take a little trip back to the womb, to that original sensory sanctuary that your baby was in. So understanding what sensory life was like before birth will give us context for what we can do afterwards to calm their world. So let's think about the sense of touch in utero. Think about what your baby was feeling in utero. What do you think it was? Towards the end of the last trimester, your baby was feeling constant, deep pressure, like a full body hug all the time. They were feeling their own body, the feeling of their hands, their mouth, and their umbilical cord. They felt the skin of the inside of your womb and of the placenta. And they felt neutral warmth, a temperature that was always consistent. Now hold that image in your mind, because you are going to want to reenact that once your baby is born. Deep pressure, soft touch, skin to skin, and neutral warmth. Let's think about the sounds that your baby was hearing in utero. Do you know that by 24 weeks gestation, your baby was already starting to learn from the sounds in utero? What was your baby hearing? It was muted, not loud, not jarring. And there was all that incredible white noise, the rhythmic swishes of your blood in your veins, the gurgles of your tummy, and your heartbeat. And then, of course, the distant sound of your and possibly Dad's voice too. These are the sounds that will be comforting for your baby after they are born. Let's think about the sense of sight. Well, of course, the most underdeveloped sense, simply because there's not a lot going on in there. Your baby exists almost in complete darkness in utero. When light does shine on the tummy, it is very muted light. It has shades of reds, and it is very calming for your baby. There is almost complete darkness and no contrasting colors. So that black, red, and white mobile that your baby is dealing with now, you can understand why it's overstimulating. Let's take a moment to think about the sense of movement. Well, the vestibular system develops alongside the auditory system. And so by the second trimester, your baby is already starting to perceive movement. And that's one of the reasons why they turn upside down towards birth so that they can come out with their head down. Now, what are they feeling in utero? It's that constant rocking and floating, that sense of gravityless motion. When you lie down to sleep at night when you're pregnant, your baby will very often actually get more active, and that's because that constant rocking lulls them to sleep. Then let's talk about smell and taste, which are joint senses. And so in utero, your baby takes in smells and smells things through their sense of taste and smell. They're chemical receptors in the nasal passages and also on the tongue. And what they're feeling is the amniotic fluid, and the flavor of that is influenced by your diet. They love the taste of sweet flavors. And then finally, there's very little gravity. And so your baby's response to movement is that they feel weightless and they move against resistance. The womb is a masterpiece of soothing sensory design. It's no wonder the outside world, with all its harsh lights, its jarring noises, its unpredictable movement and gravity, can feel overwhelming. Now, your task is not to eliminate stimulation, but to make the transition gentle. This sets the tone for emotional development, for attachment, for sleep, for calming, and for behavior in the months and years to come. So there you have it, chapter 1 of Baby Sense, a little look at what your baby is experiencing immediately after birth, and a sense of why this is so important for calming and soothing your baby and for their development later. So as we finish off, I'm going to bring a mom's question into our episode. She writes, Meg, my newborn seems so unsettled. She startles at every little noise. She hates being put down and she gets overwhelmed so quickly. Am I doing something wrong, or is her behavior normal? So in the early days, little ones are very attached to their parents for soothing. In fact, almost everything in your baby's world, as well as in their body, is geared for not being calm. So as an example, the morrow and startle reflex that I've already spoken about moves your baby's arms away from midline, making them super disconcerted. Most of their movements are governed by reflexes. And so they have these jerky little movements. And all of the information that comes in from their body is actually disarming for them. This little one startles at every noise, which we understand because the womb world was so calming. And now her sensory system cannot habituate it. She doesn't like being put down because she's used to the soft, lulling movement of the womb. And she becomes overwhelmed so quickly simply because she's overstimulated and doesn't have the ability to habituate her environment. So, is this mom doing anything wrong? No. She needs to hold and cuddle and nurture her in a soothing way. She needs to develop eyes that will look for all the overstimulating information in the room. So look out for loud noises, try and create a muted, calming space. And doesn't need to put her baby down. She can hold her baby in a sling or a carrier. And I have a couple of really favorite carriers. I love our soft carriers like the Snuggle-Roo carrier, our soft wrap carriers. And putting your baby up against your body after they're born is really, really an amazing thing to do. If somebody says to you, put your baby down, you're spoiling them, don't listen to them. This is not the stage of their lives where they are becoming spoiled. They're not learning a habit at this stage. The reason your baby's wanting to be held all the time is because they've been so used to it from inside the womb world. So nurture and cuddle and develop sensory eyes. That is very, very important. And then the last piece I would recommend to this mom is to start to look at your little one's routine. And there you can use the Parent Sense app to help you to define a gentle routine for newborn babies by watching their awake times. Babies need to sleep regularly in order to stay self-regulated. So there you have it, a little bit of the science with a whole lot of the sense. And I hope that you have enjoyed this episode today. If you have, please share it with a mom. Give us some feedback if you like this new format. And listen in next month when I'll be bringing you another chapter of one of the Sense series books. Thank you for joining me today. I hope today's conversation brought you a little more clarity, calm, and confidence on your parenting journey. If you enjoyed the episode, please do share it with a friend who needs to hear it today. And also go and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss out on an episode. I'll be back next week with another episode, same time, same place, and always here to support you. And in the meantime, download the Parent Sense app to take the guesswork out of feeding, sleep, weaning, routines, and everything in between.